Gentleman yields, and I yield to myself 5 minutes to ask questions. And so, Director Davis, again, thank you for being here. My questions now are going to go to Executive Order 14019, which is from March of 2021. I'm wondering how many inmates have been registered to vote under this executive order?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think we'd have that number. We would not track how many inmates, or how many detainees actually register.
And so, if you're not tracking, how are you facilitating registration to vote and their ability to vote?
Let me just clarify a question, if I may, sir. You're referring to the Executive Order on Voting Access 14019,
That's correct.
So that the executive order requires that we provide our detainees, and as I mentioned earlier, just as a reminder, nearly all of them being pretrial, so not yet convicted, presumed innocent, education materials at their facilities about their right to vote if appropriate. It is nothing, the Marshal Service does not register voters or track who does register.
So, how, that leaves me baffled actually a little bit. So you don't know how many inmates are actually voting then, or actually requesting ballots or registering to vote. You don't know that.
We don't track that. That's correct.
So you got a number of Secretary of States have a problem with that. With that executive order. So I'm interested in the compliance. Then, do you feel like you're otherwise in compliance with that executive order?
I do.
Okay. Inmates are allowed to register in states that typically require a specific amount of time to pass before an individual's voting rights are restored. So even though they're presumed, many inmates are recidivists. Is that not true?
I couldn't answer that, not with any certainty.
Interesting. So you don't get any criminal history on any of these inmates as you're just temporarily housing them, so you're saying we don't need to know about their propensity to violence or anything else?
Now, I understand the question, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm trying to provide accurate responses. I don't know the numbers or percentage of those that are in our custody or the 80,000 or 100,000 we will process, how many have criminal histories. I'm not suggesting that none of them do. I can't answer the question.
Okay, so I really want to, I'm trying to get to the bottom of this, make sure I understand this. So in Arizona, for instance, any term of supervised release has to be completed before voting rights of an inmate are restored, for instance, right? So the language in the executive order I read is fairly broad, to encourage and facilitate that type of thing, registration and voting. I guess my question at this point becomes, are you ensuring that the executive order is not contradictory to, like, state law? And how are you doing that?
Thank you for that question. The implementation of the executive order for the United States Marshal Service is working with our facilities, and I think you identified their facilities all over the entire country, is to provide them the educational materials about their access and right. We do not register them. We do not basically provide election guidance. It is about providing materials about their right to vote. And I think the executive order goes further to say as applicable or as eligible. So it's not it is for our executive order, for our part of the executive order.
Right, that I get. So when you said earlier that you didn't keep track, for instance, of somebody was illegally in the country or not, which would have influence on their ability to, and eligibility to vote, how do you determine then who you're going to facilitate and provide this? You just provide a blanket to it and say, hey, you got a right to vote, but you guys don't step in and say, but not you, you're illegally in the country?
Right, I'm not going to, the implementation requires the facilities to provide educational material. Then it's up to the facilities how they do that. But once, I would just clarify that we do not process, we do not facilitate, we provide them the materials.
So we may want to consider this conversation some more later. And I'm almost out of time, so I want to ask this question. On the protesters that were parading and whatever, trying to influence and intimidate with regard to that particular Supreme Court decision, did the marshals, were they wearing body cams? Do you know?
I do not. I can definitely find out. And
You
get
said
back.
1,700 deputies went through, so I assume some of them had to have body cams and had a video. And the reason I ask this question is because I'm curious whether anyone went back. I get it. You were saying, well, our first priority was to make sure the lives of the justices were preserved, so we want to protect them. But you got people out here clearly violating the law. And I'm just wondering, after that toned down and settled down, whether anybody went back through and looked at the body cam footage and started going after those people for violating clearly 18 U.S.C. 1507.
Thank you for the question. I have to get back to you about the body-worn camera, but I will add this, if I may, Mr. Chairman. In addition to the instruction, they were also trained and instructed that they had the ability, if they were witnessing anything of concern or crime, to call our command center. And our command center stays in continual contact with law enforcement partners. So if they saw something and made the determination, I cannot engage because it would put the justice at risk, then they could pick up the phone and call the command center.
Right, I think I understood that, and I'm out of time, so I appreciate that, but we need to continue that. I want to know more about that footage, and I would certainly like the documents that Chairman Jordan asked for earlier. Thanks for your time. Thanks for being here today, and with that, we're adjourned.
A submission to the
Oh, I'm sorry.